Here we are. So made the episode a little bit early this week because we realised it was going to land right on Christmas. At least for me, it was going to land right on Christmas.
Right. And the week after that, it's going to land right on New Year's. And I figured we could use a break. So
exactly, that's right. Yeah. So we'll have this episode a little bit early, and then that's right. Have a couple of weeks, and then I guess a week after New Year, we should all be back on board, back on deck by then.
Yep, sounds good. So since it's only been a week, we're going to try and talk about some stuff.
Yes, exactly.
I guess. Yeah. So
I've got a few items. Do you have any particular you wanted to mention?
You can go right ahead.
All right, no worries. So, actually, I think I might start off with this one. It's not. It's just kind of amused me, really. So, I do think it's indicative of sort of the problems we're seeing in society. A punk band has apologised for causing offence. Now, this amused me because I think that, I'm not into punk or anything, but I know that punk is pretty much all about causing offence. So the punk band is called Slaves, and they have apologised for anyone who might be offended by the use of the term slave, but they themselves have said the intention of the term was actually in relation to wage slaves, essentially people who are exploited by companies. Which I think really talks to the fact that context is everything, and it's the word slave can be used in a variety of different contexts with different, somewhat different meanings. So it's not always about chattel slavery, for example, or a particular group of people who are in chattel slavery. Anyway, I just thought it was very amusing that a punk band actually apologised for something. I think they may have misunderstood punk.
Well, therein lies the problem, is that you've given context to the fact that they were wage slaves, and the problem is that's a very Marxist term, and you know how authoritarian happy Marxism tends to be. So that's another thing they don't seem to understand.
Yes,
but in terms of the apologizing thing, it is funny, but at the same time not any more surprising, really, because
yes.
what we call marginally harder music. It's all, how do I put it? It's more, they don't care about real anti-authoritarianism in any meaningful sense. Even the metal groups, they're all about compliance one way or another nowadays. They're all about political correctness, and I can attest to that, having witnessed local music scenes myself. And that sense of rebellion, sense of freedom, if it was there at all, it's gone. It's long gone.
Yeah,
actually.
And that's a really good point, actually. That's right. As I was talking about that, I actually remember, of course, your background in music. I mean, with the keyboard behind you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you would have had sort of first-hand experience of seeing those sort of problems, and it's really unfortunate. Like you say, these areas where we're supposed to be rebellious, maybe they were or weren't originally, but now we can say they definitely aren't. Huh?
Right. Yeah. That's to be sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So rather unfortunate. Anyway, but it did bring a smile to my face. But yes, it was not at all unexpected, unfortunately. But it does kind of show how deep the rot has gone, actually. I think if you've got punk bands apologising for offending people.
Right, exactly, yeah. And going away from the metal and punk world now, I'm reminded of a certain band called Lady Antebellum, which is more country, changing their name because antebellum was supposed to be associated with the South and slavery and such. So I'm just more bothered by the fact that they would comply like that to the outrage of what could very well be a marginal amount of people.
And this is a good point. It often does seem that it's a really relatively small group of people who are very, very loud, and for some reason governments and big business and so forth really kowtow to them.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one I wanted to mention was artificial wombs, which have come up into discussion again. So My understanding is that animals have been at least partially gestated in artificial wombs, and it opens up. And my understanding is the technical issues over the the issues over the last few years are more legal than technical. So there's a real concern about using them for humans. I can think of a case where it might make sense, and so but been reluctance. There's been quite a lot of reluctance for anyone to be sort of the first to do that. But as far as I know, a lot of the technical issues have now been solved.
Wow. And a short while ago, somebody was telling me that this is just kind of impossible. Like it's too much to actually kind of put into place.
Oh, they've definitely done it with animals for a long period. For most of the gestation period, it has absolutely been done for animals quite a number of times over the last few years. Yeah, so it occurs to me that if you had a situation where, say, an emergency surgery to remove, a very early fetus, maybe before it's viable and so forth, it would seem to me that that would be an opportunity to use these sort of devices, because at that point you would have a choice between the fetus dying or surviving in the artificial womb. So I'm kind of surprised it hasn't happened, actually, because as far as I know, these things have been available for a number of years now and use in animals. There have been no cases of them being used with humans that I know of. And I'm a little surprised that there hasn't been an emergency case like this where they've made the decision to do it to save the fetus. Maybe the artificial wombs weren't in the right places. Perhaps that's the problem. They weren't available at the time they needed.
Well, or you kind of know where this is leading. Maybe their priorities are a bit different. They haven't even thought about preserving the fetus.
Could be too. I wonder. I mean, the parents might have been jumping up and down, but it would take a lot of logistics to. The doctors would have to be on board, and they'd have to have one available and so forth. I could see a situation where if there was an experiment going on in a hospital, they might consider it if there was a need to, if they had to do this for the fetus to survive. But this does bring up another area, which is artificial wombs as an alternative to abortion.
Yep. Exactly, because this will be like the big test, right? Like if this sort of thing becomes available, do they have any more excuse for killing off the fetus anymore?
Exactly, that's right. So fetus viability can be down as low as 20 weeks now, but if there's, say, an abortion earlier than that, and the father wants the child to survive, could the fetus be transferred to an artificial womb? The mother surrenders all claim to the child, and the father brings up the child on his own.
Yep. Now, is this an actual completely separate space than the original mother, or is it like a different mother?
No, this is a completely artificial device.
Okay.
That is essentially being able to pump in the nutrients that the fetus needs to grow.
Okay.
As I said, they've definitely done it with animals from very early on in soon after fertilization to giving birth to the animal a number of times over the years. And I said that there are certainly legal and ethical problems related to using this on a human where it isn't necessary. But if they find themselves in a situation where it's the only way for the human to survive, I think that should probably set aside a lot of those ethical and legal issues. I would hope.
Exactly. Yeah. And for all the talk about pro-abortion going on in like the left media and such like that, I'm reminded of something pretty ironic, because back in the 90s and even early 2000s, a lot of sci-fi shows tend to treat the fetus as if it were a baby, as what some of us are kind of having trouble talking about without being censored, right? But like one glaring example I'm thinking of is in a certain episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where a fetus had to be transplanted to another mother. Now, this was done to write in the pregnancy of somebody else, real life pregnancy of somebody else. But the fact that you're treating it like an actual living a life form that needs to be saved, it's kind of unheard of nowadays in that kind of media, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. But probably a lot of shows would be not willing to sort of look at that now. I
Right.
suppose in that particular case, I know the one you mean. I'm a big fan of Deep Space Nine,
Yeah.
and the one you've seen. That, as you say, it was written into to cover a real life pregnancy, and it became an ongoing sort of storyline in the
Hmm.
show because effectively this child now kind of had two mothers in a sense that it
Exactly.
had an original biological mother and a surrogate mother. So yeah,
Mhm.
which was
Right.
quite a cute storyline for them to put in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. They would have probably you may not see that written into the storyline now at all.
Right. It's actually kind of worth doing like a bit of a series or a collection, like that one, times that media affirmed the fetus as a living being.
Mm.
It'll be a fun collection, a fun thought exercise.
Yeah, actually, Star Trek: The Next Generation did one too, which was
Hmm.
actually the script was originally written for Star Trek Phase Two,
Yeah,
which was a TV show that was originally going to be done in the 1970s, and they recycled a number of the scripts.
I know
And
exactly what you're talking about.
Deanna Troy got pregnant, and it was actually basically an alien life form that was gestating inside her.
Mhm.
Yes, it was interesting how they treated that pregnancy as well. So
Mhm.
I think you're quite right. It is quite different, perhaps, to how we would see TV shows treating pregnancy today.
Right. I mean, they even and this not restricted to one episode, but her species, her mother's species, Betazoid, could supposedly uh, hear the thoughts telepathically of their own fetus. So that's another indication that they've treated it like an actual living.
Ah, it's a good point. That's right. Yeah, that it was sentient and could communicate. Yes,
Mhm.
in that case. Yeah. So yeah, so it's interesting thinking about this idea that an artificial womb could be an alternative to abortion. I mean, some people may argue that the procedure is invasive for the removal of the fetus, but it's probably not dissimilar to the procedure that's necessary for an abortion anyway, since you're having to dislodge the fetus anyway. So there may be a little bit of a difference there, but it's probably, I suspect, not significant. So yes, this
Right.
will be an interesting test going forward over the next few years as to what we see about with feminism and feminists arguing over a right to have an abortion versus the right for the father to take sole custody of the child
Hmm.
post birth.
Right. Well, my mind's wandering in strange places. This is kind of jumping the gun, but I wonder if a fetus could be resuscitated if it were miscarried, if it were stillborn. Well, I don't mean stillborn, like if it died.
So there are actually failed abortions. So there have been failed abortions, and it's jurisdictions vary on what they do in the case of a failed abortion. If they attempt to abort and the child comes out
Mhm.
and is whole and viable, I think there have actually been. I think there is variation. I think in some jurisdictions they're required to try to resuscitate, while in others, I believe that may not be the case.
Right. Now, is that the cause of the rise of post-birth abortion?
Well, that's a good one to mention, actually. Yeah, exactly. So, for those who don't know, post-birth abortion is essentially the idea of being able to terminate a newborn baby, which is to many of us a horrifying idea,
Mhm.
and it leads to all sorts of questions about exactly how old the child has to be before it gains the right to life.
Mhm.
An hour, a day, a month, a year,
Oh yeah.
who knows?
Mhm.
So, yes, and there are already some jurisdictions that have started to look at. Well, there's certainly jurisdictions that have looked at, that allow abortion right up to the moment of birth, which is pretty hairy itself.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got a child that's viable, that's about to be born. It hasn't quite been born, and what you can now anaesthetize it and kill it. It seems like a very technical definition, doesn't it? A very technical difference. And a few minutes later, it would be allowed to survive, unless, of course, post-birth abortions are allowed, in which case it can still be killed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things, the existence of those kind of uh, arrangements and the ever increasing threshold of it, that makes you question what the priorities of this act really even is,
Mm,
if you were ever
absolutely.
pro-choice before. Right?
Absolutely, and it brings up some pretty scary prospects. I mean, in ancient Rome, for example, parents could actually kill their children. It wasn't illegal to do that, right? But we have laws, of course, saying that children are protected but it does seem that there's some attempt to erode these laws. And children's rights groups actually are raising real concerns about this as well.
Sure.
Mhm.
Right.
There's actually a number. Yeah, there's actually a number of areas where we're in alignment with children's rights groups.
Absolutely. We don't really talk. I don't want to say that. It's not that we don't really talk about it. It's just we don't. Children's rights don't. How well do you think they overlap with the men's rights movement?
So there's some areas of mutual interest. So there's in Canada, and many countries have laws like this, but in Canada, there's a special offence for a woman that kills her own newborn, and the penalty is capped at 5 years imprisonment.
Mm-hmm.
And children's rights groups in Canada have been arguing against this for many years, arguing, in my view, quite correctly, that newborns are entitled to the same protection from, or should be have the same protection from violence as everyone else in the community. Mm-hmm. Which of course then goes back to circumcision as well, where newborn boys, of course, lack protection from violence as well. But yeah, they're correctly arguing that a newborn infant that's killed, the penalty should be the same as anyone else who's killed. Yeah, and so yeah, children's rights groups have been talking about that area, and there's a few other areas there. But yeah, there's probably some limited overlap, but there's also some relating to family courts. Some children's rights groups have been talking about the unfairness of the courts and the corruption in the courts in relation to the children not having access to both parents and so forth. So yeah, I think there's some overlap.
All right.
It's just, I think there's so many issues. Certainly from my perspective, there's so many issues that we're talking about. There are issues that I really want to spend more time on that I just haven't found the time in the last 2 or 3 years, even or more. And in fact, there's a couple I really want to talk about. For example, I have mentioned previously the slavery of men in Southeast Asia and the fishing mm-hmm. fleets and so forth. That's one I really want to raise more. It's just so much to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which go on.
No. I got it.
That segues actually into my next point I wanted to mention. We've made a little bit of a change at A Voice for Men. We've had something called. It's had various names. It's been around for a long time. It's had various names. It's been called Hot on the Web. It's been called Men's Rights News. That was the most recent name. I've changed the name to Men's Rights News and Information, effective a couple of weeks ago. And now we're feeding a lot more information from Wiki for Men. So there's a lot of articles there that just provide useful background information. People don't always go to Wiki for Men and just search articles. They do see articles do come up in searches quite a lot, and we see that that's how people view the articles. But we're getting a lot of good feedback from Men's Rights News and Information with these articles for Wiki for Men being posted. Mm-hmm. And it's currently every 2 to 3 hours, typically, that one's posted. So basically it just provides a bit of background information. So a lot of the stuff we talk about can be current events and so forth, whereas a lot of I've been focusing for a number of years on foundational information. There's a lot of stuff out there that even some people in our community are just stunned at how bad some of the problems are and some of the things that have been done to men and so forth. Yeah. And so these articles will post. It's all automatic. It's scripted. So every 2 or 3 hours or so, a new article will appear there. Everyone's encouraged to look at those, and of course look at the other stuff on Wiki for Men as well, because there's a lot of great stuff on there.
Sounds good.
So that's actually all I've got tonight, because it has only been a week since we talked last.
Well, why don't we recap on this year, because this is basically our last episode of the year. So
that's right.
Yeah. So what were some highlights?
Well, so now might be going back to the previous year, but we had a series here in Australia. We had a series. I think it may have been 2021, but we had a series of problems where we had feminists standing up and doing all sorts of terrible things in schools. We had at one school, we had a feminist from actually a city council at a school getting all the white boys to stand up and basically told them that they were the problem and this sort of thing, and patriarchy and white privilege and all this sort of jazz. So we had a few things like that, and it was coming at a rate of about once a month for a while, which is kind of horrifying, actually. Even if it was proving our point, it was really horrifying that it was happening. Right. I think that may have been 2021, but I wanted to mention it because that really is a standout for me. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Vernon?
Well, I think this highlight, the big highlight, I think, still is that whole March for Genital Autonomy by Matt Walsh or something like that. I don't remember what it was actually called, but I think the big subject this whole year was his hypocrisy of right. He's openly stated that he had no problem with actual infant male genital mutilation and everything like that. And it's the irony seems to be completely lost on him and some of his followers.
Yes, you were following that quite a bit, actually, which was great. As we said in the previous episode, there's so many things going on, we can't always follow them. And it is great. Yes, I appreciated that you were able to follow that much more closely than I was. Of course, Brittany Higgins here in Australia, we've talked about the Brittany Higgins trial, was quite a big one. So I think we probably talked about it, but basically a recap is that couple of years ago, back in 2020, Brittany Higgins and Bruce Lerman went to Parliament House together after hours. They both worked there. Something happened in Parliament House. Their stories differ quite a bit as to what happened. Brittany Higgins later made an allegation of rape, but it was significant time later that a formal complaint was made to the police. There's no physical evidence. There are no witnesses. The matter went to trial. The trial collapsed. It was originally a hung jury. It was likely to be looking like a hung jury. One of the jurors actually broke the rules, and that caused the trial to collapse. Then the prosecution said that they would not be proceeding with the trial. And now it's come out, actually, I don't know if I mentioned last week, but now it's come out that the Australian Federal Police, in their files, somebody's leaked them, I think, and then it actually says that their files say that they didn't think that there was sufficient grounds for a prosecution to proceed. So Brittany Higgins, I think this is actually in the last week, Brittany Higgins has settled with the Australian federal government compensation. Now, a lot of people seem to think that that's related to the trial. It actually doesn't seem to be directly related to the trial. I think the compensation actually relates to how she claims she was treated by various politicians and so forth. They say that they didn't respond very well to her claim. They disagree. I think the whole thing's political, unfortunately, and the amount, she was apparently going for $3 million Australian dollars for compensation. The amount is not disclosed, so it could be quite substantial. Bruce Lerman is suing a number of organisations for defamation, and so I don't know if he's suing. I think he is suing the federal government, yes, but he's also suing a number of new media outlets. Something too, I don't know if it was mentioned. I would have known by last week, but I don't know if it was mentioned. It's only come out relatively recently. Turns out Bruce Lerman is actually an Australian US dual citizen. So he I don't know if he was born in the US, but he had lived there. He apparently lived in Texas for quite a while. And he's apparently, a number of media outlets have reported that he's recently returned to Texas to sort of get out of Australia, I think, which, considering everything that's happened, I can totally understand that, because at least this has not been in the media much in the US, so he won't be very well known there. So I'm sure that's a much less stressful environment for him.
Absolutely.
But he's actually, anyway, he's suing a number of media outlets, and I believe also the federal government for defamation. So there's another chapter there. We'll find out what happens. But yes, as I said, my view is I can't say what happened. I wasn't there. What I can say is there's no evidence, and because of the late complaint, and there's really no. I really felt there was no basis. I said, unless there was some sort of damning secret evidence that the prosecution had, and we now know there wasn't, there just was never enough evidence to bring a prosecution. Absolutely. And it reminds me, actually, in the UK, they had a series of failed high-profile failed prosecutions like this all around sexual assault. In one case, for example, there were texts on the phone of the accused that exonerated him, and the police hadn't properly looked at his phone, and his defense lawyers presented these texts in court, and the prosecution just had to drop the case in court. They had about 3 or 4 like that. And of course, there was Mark Pearson's case too. Mark's spoken at an ICMI previously. Yeah. And they ended up cleaning house somewhat. It remains to be seen how well they did. They claimed that they'd reformed the Crown Prosecution Service. I'm still sort of waiting and seeing. I'm hopeful, but we'll wait and see.
Sounds good. Yeah. All right. So, what's going on next year? Is there any kind of ICMI happening next year? Any updates on that?
Yes. So there's an ICMI in India. I don't know if the city has been publicly released yet, so we won't say the city, but the ICMI is in India, and as soon as the information has been publicly released, I'll check with Anil Kumar actually and make sure that and see what the latest is. But as soon as we've got that information, we'll put it up on Wiki4Men.
Okay.
And the one afterwards is let me just check and see what we've got on the wiki to see what the latest information is, because that's always the latest public information we have available. Okay, so according to the wiki, yes, we've got it in Hungary. So
okay,
yeah. So yes. Anyway, so I always keep the latest public information on there. Yes, so I'll be at both of those. ICMI 23 in India and ICMI 24 in Europe. So looking forward to both of those, actually. I've never been to India or Hungary. So
okay. Also, so one thing I'd like to bring up, since we're talking about highlights, is, well, obviously Elon Musk taking over Twitter, but that spawned a lot of returns, I think. One person that comes to mind is, of course, Paul Elam. But there's another person that's come back, and that's Karen Strong. Yeah, he's back.
Yes. It was great to see, actually. So, as you say, there are quite a few people who were offline, they've had an opportunity to come back. So it's great. In terms of social media, I'm really only focusing on Twitter now in terms of posting AVFM links there and so forth. I'm not even worrying about a lot of other sites now. Yeah.
Right, but still, it's a good way to kind of keep a gauge on what the mindset is nowadays, and we've got much more. Well, supposedly, since we got more free expression, we'll see what happens. You know, some of the more censorious ones, well, they claim to be leaving Twitter, but they spend all day on Twitter saying that.
Yes, exactly. That's right. That's right.
Exactly. So yeah, I think. Next year will be kind of interesting to follow closely, and it could be about completely valid way of looking at the mindset of the world now.
Oh, you mean in relation to Twitter? You mean in terms of what is your feeling on the response to woke? I mean, woke has grown quite a lot in the last few years. What do you think the sort of feeling is among the silent majority about how they're responding to it?
There's a lot of rightful backlash against woke. It's just one thing I'm kind of realizing, well, not horribly surprised, but one thing that's kind of becoming more clear to me is that some of the alternatives aren't all that better. Woke is not good, but usually the response is just, in my opinion, neo-traditionalist trash.
Yes, that's true, actually. It is, yeah. So that's probably a good point to mention, actually. So a lot of people misunderstand men's rights. So first of all, anti-feminism is huge. I mean, all anti-feminism says is that you're against the ideology of feminism. There's all sorts of people who are against the ideology of feminism. This may come as a surprise to feminists and to others. Well, we don't always agree on everything. And within anti-feminism, there's men's rights, and there are also traditional conservatives and so forth. And within men's rights, it's often the case that we disagree with the traditional conservatives as much as we disagree with feminists for different reasons. Sometimes the same reason too, actually. So in terms of the treatment of men, so they're both sides tend to talk about men's obligations a lot. So
exactly.
So even within feminist groups and so forth, there'll be a lot of difference of opinion over that sort of thing, and increasingly, I think it's the case, particularly as feminism is starting to fall, that those distinctions are becoming more stark, I think. Exactly. Ourselves versus the tradcons, yeah.
Oh yeah, sure, right.
Yes. So I tend to, getting back to what you about woke, yes, I think that a lot of people are seeing the problem. When I look at the comment sections of a lot of news articles, it's really interesting when the mainstream media post something that's very woke. A high proportion of the comments will often be against the article, ridiculing the article, also just listening to what people are saying in the street and so forth. Mm-hmm. The sense I get is there's a lot of people who are increasingly anti-woke and increasingly seeing the problem. I hope that's reflected at the ballot box. Mm-hmm. And now there are probably exceptions. One of the Australian states is Victoria. Victoria is in the last few decades has become the most woke state in Australia. I've always joked that Melbourne and Toronto were fighting it out for the woke capital of the world. Mm-hmm. Just so happens that I was born just outside Melbourne and I've lived just outside Toronto, so I've seen both of them. Yeah. The government just got returned in Victoria, which is really surprising considering their response to the pandemic, which was quite authoritarian and it seemed very unpopular among Victorians, but they just got returned. And also the fact that a lot of people I thought were fairly concerned about how woke they were. And nope, this government is back for another 4 years, I think. So so Victoria, I think, unfortunately, the Australian state of Victoria is possibly a bit of a lost cause. And I know people down there. I've actually got family down there, and I know they're a bit horrified by what's happened. So. But other places, I suspect it isn't so bad.
Yeah, well, you were talking about Australian articles, right? They're the ones with the anti-woke.
No, overseas too. Looking when I keep an eye on them from various sources, even looking at the BBC, for example, and you do see it varies a bit, but you do see quite a lot of mocking within of people mocking the woke and feminism and so forth in these articles. So
right,
and there's a bit of support, but I find a lot more. In fact, this is something we've noticed over the last sort of 15 years or so. It used to be that a lot of the articles were really supportive of this sort of thing, and there's been a gradual change. So,
exactly.
But I would hope it gets reflected at the ballot box. In Victoria, it wasn't. I'm hoping elsewhere it does get reflected in the ballot box.
Exactly. Yeah. In any case, the way not to argue against woke is to be just as gynocentric as they are, because
exactly.
Aside from the myriad problems that the anti-woke, the mistakes they make, a big one is the gynocentrism, especially when it comes to the women's spaces thing, the erasure of women. They're completely, in my opinion, appealing to the gynocentric side of things. They're all the conservatives almost sound exactly like feminists here sometimes.
It was feminism. That's right. It was feminism that argued that gender was a social construct, and if it's a social construct, it can be erased. And so, but now that it's women's spaces that are being erased, suddenly it's a problem.
Exactly.
Yes.
One thing that Hannah Wall and I talked about in one of my own interviews is that women seem to have this kind of sense of entitlement over men's spaces, especially in the bathrooms, especially when there's children in them.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I think that kind of stereotype of the motherly type is something that women kind of adopt at their own convenience, just so they can access. No, we're not predators. No, it's not the same with us. That's some choice words they've got to try and justify their presence in men's and boys' spaces, I think.
Yeah. In actual fact, among teachers, it now seems that the majority of sex offenders are women, actually. Well, the majority of teachers are women, so I suppose it's to a certain extent going to inevitable. But nevertheless, there are really a large number of female teachers that have been raping boys. So this is it doesn't matter whether the boys said that yes, because they're children and they can't consent. That is statutory rape. And many of these women are being. I mean, the other things too. We are seeing sort of a change in the sense that the courts are taking things a little bit more seriously in some ways, and we are seeing these women being brought to task. Although there's one I saw recently, I think it actually is a couple of years old, but I was putting on a wiki for men recently, and in this particular one, he was 14, and she successfully was able to argue that she believed he was 16. But nevertheless, obviously, she shouldn't have been sleeping with. She was 13, shouldn't have been sleeping with a 16-year-old, but. Yeah, she was able to. She got off the offence because she was able to successfully argue that she believed he was 16 rather than 14. So, which is a defence in law, certainly here in Australia, in a case like that as well.
I see.
Yeah, but I do think the courts are taking things a little bit more serious, taking female offenders a little bit more seriously now. But it's a long way to go. The work of Sonia, for those who don't know, Sonia Starr at the University of Michigan has done some great work looking at gender and so forth. And she started out looking at different ethnicities and looked at white Americans versus black Americans and found a measurable difference in that is black Americans were more likely to be convicted than white Americans. And then she looked at gender and found a much, much larger, about 6 times larger difference.
Oh, yeah. Across the races even, or?
As a whole, actually, I'm not sure, but as a whole it was, yeah. Actually, it'd be interesting to look at see whether the effect was magnified among black Americans. Yeah.
Right.
But across the entire gender, it was 6 times larger. But yeah, she's done some great work. So the message is getting out there slowly. Yeah. But on Wiki for Men, I do track a lot of these cases because I believe that I want to put a human face on these offences. Yep. And it's also useful to track how over time how these cases are before the courts. I've already been quite busy over the last few years and have generated a lot of these cases to track and haven't tracked many of them yet. But I've just started recently and I've already found a couple that I'm a bit suspicious about that need to be chased, and to find out what really happened. These are both Australian cases, but we had one where there was a woman who was convicted of a false accusation and she was jailed for 9 months and she was bailed after 2 hours because there was an appeal pending. And that was the last we heard of it in the system. So in the media, I should say. So I'm going to be tracking actually with the Attorney General of that Australian state, contacting them and finding out what actually happened in that case. There's another case of a woman that drove a vehicle at a man, and it's alleged, and she is alleged to have hit this man, and that matter again seems to have stalled in the courts. And I've already written actually so that one hasn't gone to trial yet. And I've actually already written to the Attorney General of that state asking for a clarification as to what has happened there, because the matter it's quite serious, and she doesn't seem to have gone to trial. There's no media reports, so I've asked the Attorney General if she's still in custody in the state, and if so, or when they intend to go to trial. So, and if she's not still in custody, I'm going to want to know why.
All right.
So I'm going to be tracking a lot of these anyway, and finding out, because I had suspected when I started this project a few years ago that we'd find that there were a few cases that like this have slipped through the cracks, and already two of the first ones I've looked at have already come up as suspicious, and I need to track what's going on, whether the process is being followed, and whether those women are being put before the courts and prosecuted as needed.
All right. So, anything else that we want to kind of get before the year is up?
No, so yeah, I was just going to say, do you have anything else for 2022? Yes, that was my thoughts. Don't know if I do.
Yeah, I'm just not thinking of anything in terms of the men's issues and like the more serious subjects. But one thing that's still stuck on my mind as to how the stupidest thing Wizards of the Coast ever has done.
Yeah.
I don't think we talked about this on the show just yet, but so you know Wizards of the Coast who make Mixed Magic the Gathering, right?
Yes.
So what? So have you heard anything about the 30th anniversary special?
Have I heard anything about it? No, but I probably wouldn't be tracking it.
Okay, right.
No.
Well, so for their 30th anniversary, Wizards of the Coast had this bright idea of releasing proxy, like a proxy set, like collections of 4 booster packs of proxies of the original alpha sets.
Oh, right.
The alpha and beta
Right.
sets. Not alpha, I mean beta because of the inclusion
Beta.
of Volcanic Island, but right.
Yeah.
All right, sure. How much do you think it was sold for?
Well, the original alpha and beta cards would be quite expensive.
Well, the real cards.
The real cards are quite expensive. Yeah, exactly. So you ask what the price.
They were going to sell the proxies for about $1,000.
Oh my gosh! I was going to say probably maybe say $100 for a starter deck or something, but $1,000 for the proxy.
$1,000 for 4 packs, and you're not even guaranteed any of the Power 9 cards in there. It's complete random.
Wow.
Right. It was a big backlash.
Yeah, that's huge.
Wizards.
They're not the original cards. They're just
they're fakes. They're officially released fakes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Now, selling proxies isn't anything that's actually new. They've done series where they've kind of done proxies of like professional like pro player decks and such like that. So they're gold bordered cards, and so they're proxies, but in your own play group you can probably use them if you want to, kind of a deal. But these are $1,000 fakes.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I guess maybe not everybody's au fait with Magic the Gathering. So the alpha cards were, of course, the original set. Then came the beta. The alpha cards, if I recall correctly, had a different backing or different card shape, so they couldn't be used with all the. But from beta onwards,
more
they
round.
had.
Yeah,
they're right. So from beta onwards, they could all be used. I remember when I started playing around '95 that you could use beta. You could use beta cards if you had them, but the alpha cards couldn't because of the slightly different card shape.
Right.
And proxy cards are used if some people have very valuable cards that they don't want to play with, and if they own the card and the other players agree, you can put a proxy in and play with the proxy in lieu of your valuable card that you don't want to play with. But you have to, supposed to own the card in that case.
Right. Yeah. Well, nowadays, in a more practical sense, maybe you'd own a card, but if it's too expensive, then you probably don't even have to own a card to play a proxy if the play group agrees to it. Anyway. I
was going to say, if everyone agrees, that's fine. Exactly. That's right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there might be reasons why you want to play it from the play point of view to see how the card plays. Yeah. Even though it's hard to get. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But, if it was the entire beta collection, maybe they would have had a better case of selling it for $1,000. But this is 4 random packs for $1,000.
Yeah,
that's atrocious.
It is absolutely extraordinary. Yeah. How'd that go? Did they? Did anyone buy?
So it was so vastly hated that everybody was trying to boycott it. But then Wizards kind of announced that it was sold out, and at first we thought that people are still dumb enough to buy them.
Yeah.
But as soon as we found out that they also then restocked it, it was probably staged. Some people think that it was mostly that whole selling out thing was a staged test.
So they purchased all their own stock,
right? Yeah,
and then restocked it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Now,
trick.
Some Magic the Gathering oriented channels who are more, they tend to be sponsored and they can afford to buy such things. The ones that did still hated it so much that they ripped the $1,000 products on camera.
Right.
Posted video of it.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah. It was that maligned,
Wow.
Nobody likes it. My local game store, they refuse to stock it for completely understandable reasons.
Well, it makes sense. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. What a shame too, because it would have been interesting to have those early cards in play again. I mean, I started in '95, I think, and already some of those cards were rare by the time I started, let alone
Oh yeah.
now. Can't believe it's been 30 years since Magic first came out. Gosh.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. It's to the point right now that if you're not sleeving the cards, and it's painful to see them being shuffled.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah, because some of the original dual lands, those are like rifle shuffled and like damaged before our eyes, and like some of the old video footage I've seen. So it's like some thousands of dollars of cards. Some people are arguing that it's better to actually just go ahead and purchase the real cards that you want instead of chancing it on
I see what you mean. Even the proxy cards rifling them was a problem because yes, you're right. That's right. Yes, the expense on that it would pay. I'd love to. I mean, it's not kind of nice to see the dual cards back, but yeah, that price, dual lands back, but that price is ridiculous. They were still around when the original ones when I was playing, and they got rid of them actually while I was playing. So I was a bit heartbroken by that. I like the dual lands, the original ones.
Yeah, I mean they're simply too strong. Like you just they're because now I don't know if you're familiar with this concept, but those are fetchable now. Because
no.
Right, yeah, because we have fetch lands now that searches for lands of a certain basic land type, even though they don't have to be basic lands. So you can search for a dual land and put it into play untapped.
Right. Yes. Right. Yes. I see. Yeah, that's very powerful. Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
Yeah,
anything else?
I hope I'm not losing the audience here by this.
With the discussion of Magic, exactly. That's right. So Vernon's very into Magic. I have played in the past, and we do have plans, which kind of got stalled at one point, to play a vintage game. So we will get there. We're actually going to get there in the new year finally.
Yeah, we're going to try.
Yeah, there were delays on my side. I'm afraid all sorts of delays going on, and then I had all my Magic cards packed away at one point, and so we'll get there.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to cover?
No, I think I'm spent on that one.
Yes. Yes, no worries. It's coming up, I think, about a little bit under an hour. It's probably a little bit shorter than a lot of our episodes, but it's only been a week. But yes, I think we covered a lot of really good areas.
Yeah, of course, something that was done in a week's notice. I think we did okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. All right. So we'll reconvene in, I think, 3 weeks now.
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
Great. All right. Great. Thanks, Vernon. We'll talk to you after Christmas and New Year.
Yeah, let's do that.
Bye-bye.
Bye.